Hey, I'm Randy, and you're watching The Cheap Audio Man. Here at The Cheap Audio Man, we talk about high-value, hi-fi, home theater, and headphone equipment. And today, we're talking about one of my favorite speakers ever, the Sony SSCS5. Not only are we going to talk about this, we're going to talk about how to make this Sony speaker sound like a $500 speaker, or even a $1,000 speaker, through the magic of science. So, sit down, grab a cup of coffee, and let's modify the heck out of this Sony SSCS5. Today's sponsor is Squarespace. Squarespace is a ridiculously easy way to start a website. Thank you, Squarespace. So it's really exciting because we're having a push. We're getting really close to 100,000 subscribers. When we hit 100,000, we're giving away a whole bunch of stuff. SVS, Prime wireless speakers, U-Turn, free Orbit turntable, Fluence, free turntable, Emotiva, free set of B1 Plus speakers, and a couple of gift cards. Gashelli Labs, 2 or 3 J2 DACs, Andover, whole spin system, periodic audio, IEMs, whole bunch of people, isoacoustics, some isoacoustics things. In order to enter, you have to fill out the Google form. I will link that in the description, and also link the video that you can go watch if you want to. You gotta subscribe, obviously, fill out the Google form, and follow me on Instagram. It's not a deal breaker if you don't have Instagram, but free stuff. This speaker has a bit of a pricing dilemma. It goes from $88 around Black Friday, and sometimes throughout the year, $88, and then it goes up to $150 most of the time. But apparently, now it goes up to $228. But don't despair, because even though the pricing is like your 5-year-old that got into your Red Bull stash, unpredictable. It actually is predictable. These are still a great speaker, really at any price. At $150, they're a great speaker. At $88, they're a ridiculous speaker. At $228, still a good speaker. I still think at $228, it competes with things like the JBL Stage A130, really beats the Klipsch R51M. So even at $228, the Sony SSCS5, still a good speaker. Out of the box, the Sony SSCS5 has very good bass. This is kind of a paperish woofer. Then it has a 1-inch soft dome tweeter and a 3/4 inch super tweeter. So overall, the sound signature on this speaker, stock, is clear bass, bit of a scoop out in part of the mid-range, very detailed top end, and sound stages and images really well. Really a remarkable speaker. Can be a bit fatiguing at higher volumes. Also at higher volumes, 85 dB and up, the speaker can start to fall apart, but that is not exclusive to just the Sony. That happens to a lot of bookshelves, a lot of smaller bookshelves. It's pretty small. It can be a desktop speaker, it can be a front channel speaker, be whatever you want it to be. Plant holder, whatever. So not only does the Sony SSCS5 sound good out of the box, after I cracked this thing open, it's actually built very well inside. It has a brace about 75% of the way up, really between the woofer and the tweeters. So it has a brace in there, and it also has a whole bunch of corner gussets, which is basically just a bunch of triangle pieces of wood glued into the corners inside the enclosure. It has really good binding posts, but more importantly, the crossover is actually very well thought out, and it uses decent parts. It uses air core inductors, decent capacitors, and frankly, I was surprised when I took a look at the crossover. Back to Squarespace. So, when I needed to start a website, and I needed to do it in about 3 hours, there's only one choice. That was Squarespace. Actually, there's more than one choice, but I chose Squarespace because it was easy, and I had a discount code, and you have one now. It's called the Cheap Audio Man. Squarespace.com/Cheap Audio Man. You get 10% off. Here's the thing. If you have a business, if you have a hobby, you can create a website very easily. Neil, the guy that's making these speakers, you should start a website, and you should use Squarespace to do it. Take some pictures, do some little diagrams, and then you drag and drop it, and then boom, you have Neil's speaker design. nsb.com. That's probably already taken. But neilspeakerdesign.com maybe not be taken. Go check it out. Friends, families, drop your family photos in there. You want to sell something? You can add a shopping cart. You can sell merchandise. You can collect emails and send out a newsletter about quilting. Star Wars Quilting. StarWarsQuilting.com. That could be your new website. I don't know if you're going to get away with that, though. But you could. Point being is, if you've ever thought about creating a website, there has never been a better time. And there's never been a better place than Squarespace. I can't believe that rhymed. Squarespace.com/cheapaudioman for 10% off your first order. The Sony SSCS5. This speaker has starred in more videos than I have. Just kidding. I was in all my videos, I think. Anyway, it's awesome. It's awesome. It can be even more awesome. Let's find out how. So this is a shameless Patreon plug. I've gotten to know a lot of my patrons and become friends with many of them. And there is one person, Neil B, in my Patreon place, who's a very talented speaker designer. Actually, he designed a set of transmission line speakers with a Lineam tweeter that he absolutely just loves. And I would imagine they are spectacular. We worked on something together. And when I say we worked on something together, I said, hey, why don't you make a smaller version of that with drivers that are readily available? And that was about the extent of my involvement. So he did. So he's also working on that. But we also talked about the Sony SSCS5, and I asked him, can I get you a pair of these and see if you can improve upon it? I don't know if he bought them or I bought them. Anyway, he did. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So Neil has all the equipment to measure the different driver responses and things like that, all of it. He's got all the fun toys. And he took a look at this speaker and he put together really probably 10 different iterations of the crossover to get it just right. And I think he got it just right. But let's back up. What even is a crossover? A crossover is a set of components, capacitors, inductors, resistors, that you slap together to send the right frequencies to the right driver, which means you want the high stuff to go to the tweeter. You want the low stuff to go to the woofer. Sounds easy, but it's not always that easy because there are characteristics of drivers. Drivers have they have a sweet spot for the most part, unless they're a full range driver. A regular tweeter, a regular woofer will fall off at certain frequencies. And oftentimes when they fall off, they get a little angry. And so there's spikes and stuff like that. Well, if you put two drivers together and you don't have them crossed over well, those spikes and troughs can add up, and it can be a real mess when you try to combine two different drivers. To get around that, you can use different types of crossovers. A first order crossover, second order crossover, even a third order crossover. And what that does is basically isolates the driver even more. For simplicity's sake, a first order high pass or low pass doesn't isolate the driver as well as a second order high pass or low pass filter. So as you get higher up, higher order crossovers, the slope of the fall off starts to get steeper. So if there are issues between drivers, you can mitigate those by using a higher order crossover. With all that said, Neil really used second order crossovers in this design to get these things where they need to be. He did some other stuff too, but fundamentally, he's using a very tried and true method to improve the crossover. This speaker is actually a little bit more complicated to tackle when it comes to redesigning a crossover. The reason being is it has 3 drivers, one of which is a super tweeter. Generally speaking, bookshelves are two-way, so those are easier to redesign because you're only dealing with 2 different drivers. When I got in here and pulled out the crossover, I started seeing some interesting stuff. Number one, again, the parts were better than I thought they would be. But the super tweeter was actually wired in what's called reverse polarity. So the positive lead coming off of the crossover actually was connected to the negative lead on the super tweeter. Neil had some theories about why that was done, but he changed it. Not only did he change it, because we thought, wonder what it would be like if we just replaced the stock values with better parts, better inductors, better capacitors. And we did kind of an iteration of that. Neil wasn't really happy with that, and I don't blame him. He ended up redesigning and utilizing these drivers in a different way than what Sony designed them for. And I think the results are spectacular. Here's another cool thing about Neil's design, is there are variations of it in his plans. And you can start off with just replacing really one part. And you can get a lot of sonic benefits from just replacing one part. So if you're on a budget and you can't afford the entirety of the crossover that he recommends, you can just buy one thing and he'll walk you through it. I think there are 2, if not 3 different versions of the crossover that you can choose to do if you're so inclined. And it really depends on what you want. If you love the sonic characteristics of the speaker and you want to improve the bass a little bit more, then you can start with just one part. There are also some enclosure modifications or physical modifications that you can do. All spelled out in his plans, great pictures, huge PDF. He walks you through every single part of the process, and he's also available to field questions. He's a good guy. He's only charging $20 for the plans. I told him he should charge more, but he's only charging $20. And you get unfettered access to him for $20. And since he's only selling the plans, he's not stocking the crossover parts. He tells you which ones he suggests, but you can source the parts from wherever you want to. So you're not paying a markup on any of the parts that he's recommending. So there's freedom. You don't just have to buy what he says, what he designs, and what he sends to you. You can get the plans and do it how you want to do it, which is pretty cool. If you want to go the full Monty and change out the entirety of the crossover, and you still, I think, reuse some components, if you want to change out the whole thing, I think the parts are around $180. So 180 plus 20 comes in at $200. And people are going to be like, why would you spend $200 on a speaker that only costs $80 or $150? But I think we have to quit equating quality with price, because there are high value products out there like the Sony that has great bones. This has a great enclosure. These have great drivers. If you put a great crossover in there, you can take the performance from this $80 speaker, move it way up to where it beats $500 and sometimes even $1,000 speakers. Because I've listened to all of them. I've listened to this in comparison to higher priced speakers. And guess what? With the crossover mod, I think this beats them in certain aspects. I think this speaker with the crossover mod can beat $500 and even $1,000 speakers. The biggest improvement here is in the bass extension and bass clarity, but also in reducing the amount of smearing between the bass and the mid-range. Everything got more separated. Everything got cleaner. The soundstage improved. Everything sounded bigger. And again, this thing doesn't sound bad to begin with. I was shocked. I was really shocked when I turned these on for the first time and I started hearing the differences. And what I did was I did the mod on one speaker, and then I left the other speaker stock. And then I put my receiver into mono mode. And then I just hooked up a left and a right. What I did was I was playing the same song, and then I rolled over to the right, listened to it, then rolled over to the left. So I was A-Bing the modded speaker versus the stock speaker. And it was, I'm not going to say night and day, but it was a big difference. With the modded crossover, I think this speaker competes across the board with the ELAC Unify, the first gen, across the board. Similar sound characteristics across the board. I think the bass, though, is better on the Sony with the modded crossover. I think the modded Sony is better than the ELAC debut reference as far as bass goes. And that's a $500 or $600 speaker. I think the bass on this competes with the Wharfdale Linton, which is a $1,500 speaker. You may laugh at me, but I would just recommend trying it yourself and A/Bing it against speakers that you already have. Even at the full retail price, which I don't recommend buying the Sonys at the full retail price. Buy them at $150 or better yet, $88. Do the mod and you're going to be happy as a clam. Mid-range, balanced out way better than the stock speaker. Has a more rich tone to the mid-range. This mod changes the overall characteristics of the Sony, but it never eliminates the magic that it is the stock Sony SSCS5. It just fixes things. Maybe brings down the treble a little bit, but I think you can talk to Neil, and there are some resistor values that you can play around with if you want to bring that treble up a little bit more. Because Neil's design is really more of a flat line frequency response. Since the top end is a little bit more controlled, a little bit flatter, it eliminates fatigue associated with the stock version of the Sonys. Overall, I think this is a brilliant design for a new crossover. I think you have options if you don't want to do the full thing. Neil's a great guy. He's going to help you out. And I think he's undercharging for these plans. But again, good guy. He's really talented. And I think Neil's probably going to end up just designing speakers full time at some point. He's that good. He thinks outside the box and he plays around with transmission line stuff that really, you can really make a full range speaker for not a ton of money. If you are at all interested in DIY speaker stuff or speaker modifications, I think this is a great place to start. You don't have to worry about getting an enclosure. You don't have to worry about buying drivers. The only thing you have to worry about is getting the crossover out of here, which can be a little challenging because there's not a ton of real estate. Also, when you go into this thing, you'll see that it has 4 little bolts right here. Now, this surround is actually glued into the enclosure. So once you get the bolts out, the bolts hold the surround, this plastic surround thing, and the driver in. Once you get those bolts out, just put something in there and slowly start to kind of push it up a little bit around there. And I've done 3 of these and I haven't broken one of these surrounds, but you have to be a little bit patient. You get something in there, pry, just a little bit, just around. Keep doing that and then it eventually comes out. Neil will help you out, and in the plans it describes the easiest way to get the crossover out. I didn't do it Neil's way. It was a little bit harder. I'm going to do it Neil's way from now on. If you want to support the channel, you can sign up for Patreon, patreon.com/cheapaudioman. We have a Patreon-only Discord server, and we also have a Patreon-only Facebook group. Then you can meet Neil and talk to him, and he will answer every question that you possibly have. You can also use the affiliate links in the description. I'll link Neil's email. You email him if you want the plans. I don't make anything if Neil sells plans. I'll link the Sony SSCS5s. If you buy those through my affiliate link, I will get a commission off of that. You can also sign up for Amazon Music or Tidal Music. Links in the description. If you sign up, even for a trial, I do get a couple of dollars. You can also buy a Rocktopus mug. So don't binge watch anything on Netflix or Hulu. Binge listen, maybe through your modded Sony SSCS5s, and fill your soul with happiness. That's trademark, by the way. And with that, I'm Randy. I'm the Cheap Audio Man.